Well, hello. Hello and welcome. Welcome to Nibbling Around Town. I am Mark Whalen, your host and producer. Now, you know me, this face, from Around the Town with Mark. If you're not familiar with Nibbling Around Town, it's my new show that features all things great with food. So we hope that you're going to tune in and visit with both of these shows very often here at SEC-TV. Well, my guest today is a repeat, one of our favorite guests. Today she's here with her cooking hat on, and we're going to be showing you really great things about cooking of days past. So let me go ahead and introduce my guest, Leslie Evans from the Avery-Copp House Museum. Leslie, welcome, or shall I say welcome back?
Thank you for having me back, Mark.
Well, we're wonderful. Well, back
Pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to, and obviously everyone can see that we've got a beautiful display of all kinds of great food, and Leslie is going to walk us through what she has here, antique utensils and ingredients and finished products, and we're actually going to get to taste some of these things. The one thing I just have to mention that you're missing, unfortunately, is the smell. It smells wonderful at this table.
Yes, it's all spicy, isn't it? It's lovely.
Wonderful things. So try to put that in your mind as you're watching the show today.
So what we have planned today, I'm going to walk you through the preparation of a historic recipe, but also I'll be comparing and contrasting as we go along about how people can adapt this to a modern kitchen, because it is a delicious recipe and still can be enjoyed today. And I should mention that in my job, I work at the Avery-Copp Museum, which is a historic house museum on Thames Street in Groton. Yeah. And we love to do programming there that incorporates food, because we find that teaching with food, either preparing food or letting people taste food, is a great way to be able to reach back into the past and bring it to life. And so that's what I'm hoping to do today. I am going to be making a savory cheese spread that was known as pounded cheese, and just telling you about all the different ingredients, why they were important historically, and then again how you can make that today. So
I think everyone should real quick run and get a paper and pencil or a pen so you can start writing some of these things down, because I guarantee you you're going to want to try these, especially with the holidays coming up. How about treating your family to something new that's old, or old that's new?
And if you're watching and you don't have a pen and paper and you forget anything I've told you, please just call or email us at the Avery-Copp House, and I'm really happy to share the recipe with you or answer any of your questions. But it's really easy. You probably will be able to remember it just fine. So I want to show you the end result, which is a beautiful golden colored savory cheese spread. That's what we're going to be aiming for in the end.
Okay.
And that can be used in a number of ways. You can traditionally, it was spread on slices of bread like this and just served as a snack, or what we'd call an hors d'oeuvre. It can also be melted on bread, and it's delicious melted.
Wonderful.
Great on crackers. Can be used that way. It also makes a really good grilled cheese sandwich. So,
wow.
And any way that your imagination wants to use it.
Perfect for the cheese lovers out there, right?
It is. So cheese was a very important food product in early New England. It would have been something that people who had access to milk would have been making in the spring and early summer and then preserving it. It was a way to preserve milk, because they did not have refrigeration to any great degree, and milk would be preserved by turning it into butter and cheese so it could be used year-round.
No such thing as running to the big Y.
No, there was not. So some people were lucky enough to have an ice house or access to ice, and then going into the 19th century, people did have an ice box. But food preservation was a real challenge, and cheese is a great way to be able to use milk and preserve it.
And also that a lot of the ingredients weren't available year-round, correct?
They were not. A lot of the ingredients that we're going to use today involve the spice trade, and so they depended on the import of goods from other parts of the world. So living in a seaport area like New London Harbor, you would have had these spices coming in and had them available to you if you could afford them. One thing that was made at home was mustard, and we'll be using that. So as we use each item, I'll tell you a little bit about it, about how it would have been used historically and maybe how rare and costly something that's very ordinary to us today, like pepper, has become. So what you need for this recipe is cheese, about 2 cups of cheese, about 1/4 cup of butter, and some mustard.
Okay, butter.
And
Good
then some
mustard.
spices. And the spices that I brought with me today are curry powder and pepper. I've got some salt.
Yep.
And you can either use chili powder, or in this case, we're going to use Tabasco sauce. So the ingredients are pretty simple things that a lot of people already have in their pantry.
Yeah.
We also are going to be using a little bit of hard cider, and you can use cider, you can use Madeira or a little bit of wine. You can use sweet cider if you prefer not to have alcohol. So again, we'll talk a little bit more about that when we come to the point of actually using it. But just showing you, to start with, I just start with some chunks of cheese. I like to use more than one kind because I think it makes a more interesting product in the end. But if you are just passionate about cheddar cheese, or you only like Monterey Jack, you can use that. It's your recipe, so you can personalize it to your tastes. I do find having the cheese at room temperature makes it a lot easier to mix the ingredients together. So let it warm up a little bit, and then I cut it up into cubes about this size or a little smaller, or you can, if you want to give yourself a little bit more of a head start, you can even grate it. You can also, I should say, make this recipe in a food processor if you want to be modern about it and save a lot of time. Yeah. It tastes just the same in the end. I'm going to show you the historic way. I just find it really satisfying to work with food like this. But if you're in a hurry or you just want it, in the end, you can do it in a food processor. I'm going to be using an old-fashioned masher, but you can also use a mashed potato masher. That'll work just as well too. If you don't have a food processor or prefer not to use it, but don't want to be as old-fashioned as using a wooden masher, you can use this tool as well. So what you'll want in a bowl is about 2 cups of cheese, either cubed or grated, and that'll be your starting base for your pounded cheese recipe. And I've got one that I've been working on a little bit here, and I'll show you how I will then incorporate the rest of the ingredients. So this is where the pounding part of the name comes in. You've really got to work that cheese, either pound it or push it or twist it or smush it in some way so that you pulverize it and all the different kinds of cheese get blended together. Now, historically, this recipe would have been a way to be able to use up little bits of leftover cheese ends, pieces of cheese that had become hard. That wouldn't be thrown away. There was a lot of labor involved in the making of cheese, and people were very conscious of not wasting food. And so this is a way to kind of use up old cheese but disguise it with spices and moisten it up a little with butter and cider. So, but we're very fortunate. We can just usually acquire fresh cheese, and that's what I have here. So this isn't as hard or as resistant to mashing as drier, older cheese would be. But it still does benefit from the addition of some of the softening ingredients. So Mark, if I could get you to hand me that butter.
Okay.
We're just going to add to the mashed cheese. Once you've gotten it fairly well smushed up, so to speak, then you want to add a little bit of butter, maybe 1/4 cup or so, but I'm going to start with less than that because my cheese is pretty soft already. You do need to put a little bit in, though. And I really recommend in this recipe or any other recipe, the end result is really going to be affected by the quality of the ingredients that you put in here. So if you're able to get good butter, even though you're not using a lot of it, that's going to make a difference. And if you could just hold that up, Mark. One brand that I really love is Kerrygold Irish butter. That's what we're using today, and I think it's the best. You might have another one that's your favorite, but use a good one if you can get it. So I'm going to smush that in, and then I'm going to add a little mustard. So if you could
Okay.
pass me that, Mark.
I certainly can.
If you don't like mustard, you don't have to put mustard in. When I'm making this for my nephew, who is crazy about mustard, I put in a little extra. So it's, again, a matter of personal taste. Mustard is something that grows very well in New England, and people could make this at home or purchase it or trade for it locally. So mustard, historically in the 18th and 19th century, was not expensive and very widely used. So I'm going to put in, I would say, about a teaspoon of mustard.
Okay.
And just work that in as well. And it's starting to get softer, and you'll kind of hear a squishy sound.
I can hear that.
you hear
Yep.
that?
Yeah, I can hear
So
it.
that's what
Yep.
you want to hear. But we still have one more bit of liquid that we need to add. So if you could pass me that cider. And
Okay.
this cider is hard cider. This one is actually from Clyde Cider Mill right here in our area in Old Mystic. Wonderful hard cider they have there. But any good hard cider will do. I put in there, I would say, about a tablespoon of that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can use sweet cider or your favorite alcohol that you'd like to add to it. And that will moisten the cheese enough so that it really can be spread on toast or
Getting more and
whatever
more
you want to
squishy
put it on.
sounding.
It is. So now it's getting so it's almost ready to add the spices to it. So before we do that, let's talk a little bit about spices. Most of the spices that we're familiar with, things like ginger, pepper, nutmeg, cinnamon, those things grow in tropical places, in the East Indies or some of them in the West Indies now. And in the 18th and 19th century, what that involved was a trip around the world in a ship. And so to go to the Far East, acquire these spices and bring them back home to New England was a huge undertaking, very dangerous. A fortune could be made if you were able to bring home a ship full of spices. But there was a lot of risk involved with storms, shipwrecks, pirates, disease in foreign ports.
Wow.
So it was a risky trade, but a very profitable one for those who were able to have success at it. As a consequence, these spices were very expensive. They were luxuries. Not everybody had them, and people who did have them were very conscious of how precious they were. For instance, in the kitchen, you wouldn't just leave them out. You would have them in a metal tin like this, which would keep them safe from mice or from from insects, and keep them dry and keep them at their peak of condition. So these little boxes come out, and
It's almost like a bank vault.
it is. And when you want to use cinnamon, say, I could get that out, and the spices wouldn't come already ground. They would come whole. So you would have a cinnamon stick, which cinnamon is the bark of a tree, and it would come like that. Nutmeg would come whole, and you would grate these things as you wanted to use them.
And that would be a nutmeg?
Yes, that's a nutmeg, and
Yep.
we can put a little nutmeg in this recipe. So the spices would be really fresh, and you'd be really conscious when you're served something with a lot of spices in it that you're being treated to something very special. So in our recipe today, we're going to put a little bit of curry powder, which is a spice blend itself.
Okay.
And Mark, if you want to add about a teaspoon of curry powder, and just sprinkle it over the top there. And I'm going to blend that in. And then let's add a little bit of Tabasco for a little bit of heat to this.
Okay.
Now, if you don't like hot things, you can skip that, but just give it a few dashes of it there. Maybe,
Is that good?
well, maybe a little more than that, yeah. I'm going to be bold about it.
Sure, why
And
not?
since we have the Tabasco out, there's an interesting Groton connection there. So Tabasco sauce still today is made on an island called Avery Island. And it's called that because the people who settled there and started this company, McElhenney is their last name now, but they are Avery descendants, and they're descended from our Groton Averys.
Our Averys,
yeah,
wow.
so I think that
It's a wonderful little
it is.
tidbit.
When I see Tabasco, I always think of that. and it's been around for a long time. So during the 1800s, that started. So it's an old flavor, completely unchanged recipe because it was perfect and still very popular.
Wow, never would have known.
Yeah. So this is starting to look now like we want it to look. It's well blended, all the flavors incorporated, and spreadable. You could still keep working it. I can still see some chunks in there, but it looks pretty good.
Chunks could be good.
And then, so that's the basic recipe. And then you can personalize it a little. Say we wanted to add a little bit of pepper. We would have to grind that pepper in a mortar and pestle like this. Here's a modern pepper grinder for the easy way. And the way, if things developed, just like technology develops today, somebody was looking for an easier way, and gradually they'd figure out, well, how can I do that without so much labor? But in the 18th and 19th century, definitely mortar and pestle. Those of you at home can use your pepper grinders. But grinding spices like this, just the smell is just fantastic.
Yeah, and it's so easy.
It is. And the flavor is really intense. So why don't you go ahead and put a few pinches of that pepper in here, Mark.
Okay.
And we can add a little bit of salt just because I want to talk about salt. In the 18th and 19th century, salt was really necessary for the preservation of food. A lot of meat and a lot of fish was preserved by salting it. So
How much?
About not that much, about maybe a quarter of that much. So this is sea salt that we're adding. And the salt industry used to be very important in New England, especially along the coast of Cape Cod, where they would produce salt by evaporating seawater and then harvesting the salt from that. So there were huge vats, not deep, but long, and I mean football field long.
Wow.
Where the seawater would be pumped into them, and then the water allowed to evaporate, and then the salt harvested from there. When it rained, they would put covers over the top of that to try and keep the rainwater out. But that was a really important industry on Cape Cod.
Wow.
And so sea salt was readily available here, and you had to have it. What else could we add? How about a little nutmeg? Would you like to grate some nutmeg?
I will definitely grate some nutmeg for you.
So Mark is using an old-fashioned nutmeg grater here. I think with nutmeg, it's so easy to grate it, and these graters are so readily available, and the quality is so much better if you can grate it just as you're about to use it, rather than having it pre-ground sitting in a jar for
so good.
months or even years.
Yeah. More?
Yeah, I think that it just depends how much you like. That's good.
I think that's good.
Yeah. So again, when you're making this at home,
It makes it more fun, too.
yes, it does.
Yeah, it really does.
And it really kind of connects you to your food in a way where you appreciate what's in it because you have ground that yourself. I think, to me, that makes a difference. People at home, when you're making this, just personalize it. Whatever you really like, use a lot of it. If there's something you don't like, don't use it. It's a very forgiving recipe, and children really enjoy making this as well, and then are usually very willing to try it because they've had a hand in making it. So it's a fun thing to do with kids, and it's fun to watch them then be willing to taste it. Especially they love it if you can melt the cheese on the bread. So really, that's it. We're all done, and that's ready to enjoy. So
When do I get to taste it?
you can taste it anytime you like. If you like to sample, why don't you sample it? You can
would love
let
to.
us know what you think about it.
I would
And
love to.
if we have a little bit of time left, I can talk about some of these other implements I've got here on the
We
table.
have about 10 minutes.
All right, so let's talk a little bit
Oh,
about, you like it? I'm glad you think it's so good. Yeah.
It is so unique.
It's savory. It is unique.
You don't really... Talking with my mouth full.
That's all right. We're on a cooking show, so you can
Yeah.
you can do that.
What I like about it is you can tell that it's complex, but you don't necessarily taste the curry or the mustard.
Yeah, I think that's
But
true.
you have a creamy complexness to this. It's definitely not your average cheese spread, let's put it that way.
And it's a fun thing to have over the holidays when if you're having people over and you need to have something out for them to snack on. This is something a little different that you might want to.
You'll wow your family and friends because this is so very different.
And if you have
Right.
leftover turkey, anything like that, you can make a grilled sandwich with this is the cheese and the turkey and a little bit of cranberry sauce. If you have, I have sometimes worked cranberry into this. And
Oh,
it's really
wonderful
good.
idea.
So just fun to experiment with. So
Now, would you use whole cranberries cooked?
cooked, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So usually just if there's just a little bit of sauce left, something like that, I'll add that in.
Okay.
So I know we talked about some of these historic kitchen implements, and we kind of leapt ahead from the wooden pounder to the food processor mentally, but in between there were a lot of things happening. So first of all, just showing you some of these pounders. I have a whole collection of these. I have a dear friend who loves to scavenge antique places and come up with wonderful things, and sometime he'll
I like
he'll
that too.
say, I found a pounder, and each one is different. They almost still reflect the hand of the person they once belonged to.
Fascinating.
You can really see how they were used. They were lovingly carved and then cared for and used again and again. And to me, that's really a magical thing about them is I don't know who had it before me or what they made, but I can imagine it and how durable they are. I have one at home even that is so cracked and worn, and somebody fixed a piece of leather on the bottom and nailed it
wow.
really carefully around there
Wow.
to try and preserve their favorite old pounder.
That's wonderful.
That's a neat thing to have. For chopping, there were a lot of implements like this that I hope you can see there are 2 blades there. So that was a little bit of a shortcut.
So
If you were
just kinda-
chopping things, that would maybe do the job twice as fast. These also came as a single blade, good for chopping onions, things like that.
I have a single-bladed one
Do
that I
you?
still use.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So-
very handy.
They're still very effective, very durable. Usually the craftsmanship on these old things was really exemplary, so they last. This is a potato ricer. And I see these for sale again. You know, things come around again.
Yep.
And they're new to a new generation. And I'm finding people who are, say, my daughter's age now are really interested in cooking, knowing what's in their food, using locally grown and produced foods, and doing it themselves. And so a lot of these implements are making a comeback again because
That's
people
good.
are interested in using them. So this lifts out, and if you would cook the potato and then put chunks of cooked potato in there and then squeeze down on this, and it'll force the potato out through all these little holes to about the consistency of a grain of rice. So
perfect.
that's why it's called a potato ricer. And so you can then serve it that way, or you can mash it further to create mashed potatoes. But it was a way of...
I've seen new ones at the local market.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can get
So
those.
you can get them again. This is a cheese grater, and this has a rotating shredding, what I call that. It's like this part of a grater, but round.
And safer, you won't get your
Yes.
knuckles.
So in this little box here, you put a piece of cheese or whatever it is that you want to grate. Then you put the lid on and you turn the handle, and it will grate that. It's a way to just be able to do it without having to hold it right next to the sharp blade of the grater. And most of us have one of these at home. Might be a really old one that's been passed down in the family, or it might be one that you just bought last week, but they almost all look exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
With different size places to grate on. And this is an old one from the Avery-Copp house kitchen education supplies, but
they haven't changed.
they have
I
not
mean,
changed, so
why
they're still
change them?
very
Yeah,
useful.
Yeah, exactly.
This is from my own house, but these have been around for well over 100 years for mashing potatoes or other vegetables, turnips, carrots, parsnips, all those root vegetables.
Yeah.
So some of these things have changed a lot, some of them not so much. But again, I like to show you the historic way of doing things, but if your lifestyle makes it more practical to use modern equipment, then do it, because still you'll be able to make the recipe and enjoy
Yeah,
it. And that's the important part in the end. So
Wonderful.
that's my recipe.
Well, I love this recipe, and I'm certainly going to add it to my holiday festivities.
Your holiday repertoire.
Speaking of holidays, do you have an event coming up that you'd like to mention?
We do. I'd love to tell everybody about it. At the Avery-Copp House, we have an annual tradition of having a Christmas open house, and it's a free community event. It takes place this year on Sunday, December 9th from 4 to 6 o'clock. You can come and stay for 10 minutes or 2 hours, it's up to you, and just explore the house at your own pace. It'll be all decorated for Christmas, reflecting different eras.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so we'll have a Victorian parlor, we have a World War II sitting room, we have the servants' quarters decorated to reflect the way the Irish immigrant women who worked there
And of course the kitchen.
would have had theirs, the kitchen, and we will have all kinds of goodies on offer, including pounded cheese, if you want to come and try it. And we are collecting donations for the Groton Food Bank as well. So if you have something you'd like to drop off, we're happy to take that on that
But
day.
it's not necessary to go.
It's not necessary. It's completely free. It's our gift to the community, and we'd love to have you join us for that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Leslie, this has been a real treat.
It's my pleasure.
I just love it, and it's too bad that again that you need to smell these wonderful, wonderful ingredients. They're just terrific. So this is just terrific, and I thank you so much for sharing this.
Oh, you're most welcome.
I hope everybody's had a chance to write down the recipe, but if not, remember you can contact Leslie via the Avery-Copp House, and certainly you can go online for any contact information. And definitely put the Avery-Copp House open house on your calendar for the holidays. What an opportunity to see a beautiful house with many different eras, taste some great food, meet some wonderful people. It's a very, very exciting thing to do. And just a great way of sharing holidays with your family and friends of days past too. And I want to make mention that there's also a holiday open house here at SCC TV Studios at 80 Plaza Court. That will be on Thursday, December 13th, 5:30 to 8. Everybody is welcome. It's free. It's open. Great music, live music, wonderful food, wonderful drink.
Fun.
It's also an art show. It's a great opportunity to come down here, see what it's like in the beautiful studio, meet us, meet some of the other hosts, and just have a nice event. It's totally open, free to the public, so we'd love to have you come down and visit with us.
No, I'm glad it's not on the same night as ours. So
I'm glad it's not
That
too
sounds
quick.
fun.
I hope you will see you here, and I hope we'll see all of you out there here. And I want to again thank my guests today. I want to thank my viewers for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed my second segment of Nibbling Around Town. I'll see you again on Nibbling Around Town and Around the Town with Mark very soon. Have a wonderful holiday, make the pounded cheese, and wow your family and friends.
Or come to the Avery-Copp House and sample it at the open house.
And come to the Avery-Copp House. Either way.
Either way, I hope you enjoy
All right.
it.
Thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you again very soon.